I'm Vivin Satyan, so I think it's fair to introduce the speaker and then move on with the topic. I've been working with ManageEngine for over 9 years now, and I take care of the technical aspect of the products as well as the business aspect of products. So in case you need to get in touch with me for anything related to Active Directory, Microsoft 365, or in general IT security, please feel free to drop in a message. It need not be related to the products. It can be related to the domain as well. Even if I do not know the answers, I'll make sure to get back to you with the answers because I have a wonderful team of people working with me. All right. Now, what are the two core concepts of identity management that we are going to be talking about in today's session? All right. Even before talking about identity management and the two core concepts, let me ask you a very basic question here. Okay. Why do you think that we should be talking about Active Directory security or identity and access management even in the year 2021? Okay, Active Directory has been around for more than 20 years. Identity and access management as a process has been around for more than, let's say, 10, 11 years now. So why talk about both these topics in 2021? Well, so the way that I've set up the session is I am going to be talking about identity and access management, keeping Active Directory in mind. At the same time, I'm also going to be talking about the hybrid aspect of things. How do you onboard? How do you offboard? How do you set up MFA? How do you enable SSO? And what are the other advancements that you can do with the solutions of ManageEngine that you already have or you're evaluating? Okay. Now, when I talk about Active Directory security and when I ask people, is Active Directory security even relevant in 2021? The answer is yes. You know why? Whether we like it or not, if you're operating in a hybrid mode, your on-prem still talks to your cloud infrastructure and vice versa, right? So even if one of your setups, let's say the on-prem setup is kind of left loose, it's just a matter of time that the attack surface moves from the on-prem to the cloud. So it's really important that we focus on the on-prem aspect now, if you're operating hybrid especially, and then think about the other aspects of cloud security, okay? Now, in order to prove my point, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to be performing a quick Active Directory, a hack experiment. I'm nowhere close to a hacker, but I'm just trying to drive home a point that Active Directory security is still something that we need to pay attention to, okay? So what we're trying to do is we are going to try and crack Active Directory, assuming that you're already an insider, an employee who has basic access. Let's say not basic access, let's say above basic access, or let's say you're a line manager, not necessarily a domain admin. Okay, so you are responsible for creating accounts, so you get access to, let's say, the ADUC. So what can you do as an insider in less than 5-10 minutes to compromise Active Directory? Okay, if I'm able to convince you that yes, there are still loopholes available in Active Directory, then I think the rest of the session will be meaningful for you. Okay, because the whole idea is to drive home the point that we need to focus on Active Directory security. Okay. All right. So this is my lab. As you can see, this is a 2012 R2 box. So it's not that old, but kind of old. So what we're going to do now is for this hack, I have certain assumptions. Assumption number one is I'm already an employee of your organization, and you've given me access to, let's say, your ADUC or one of your servers. And how do you give me access to your servers? I need not be a domain admin or enterprise admin or schema admin. You can even add me to the account operators group or the backup operators group or even the print operators group. So I get access to your servers, right? So that's the basic setup of Active Directory even today. So let's assume that you've added me to the account operators group. Now, what can an account operator do without installing a third-party software or without using some fancy tools to compromise Active Directory? If you do not have the right alarm set, well, it's going to be a bit tricky, okay? So we are going to be focusing on the problem, and in the session, I'm going to be giving you the solution for the problem as well, all right? Now, I am an insider, and you've added me to your account operators group. I get access to Active Directory, and this is the Active Directory users and computers. And I need two files to initiate my attack kill chain, right? And the two files are, the first file is located inside of the C drive, Windows folder, entities folder, and inside the entities folder, you have the entities.dit file. All of you know what this is, right? So this is the Active Directory database. Let's say you have Active Directory. Okay, you're operating in a hybrid mode now, and you have 1,000 employees. Okay, now this file has information about all your 1,000 employees if they are onboarded to Active Directory. And this file also has information about the password hashes of the employees, not necessarily the password, but the password hash. Okay, so I need this file to to initiate my kill chain. And since this file is encrypted, I need something to unlock whatever is there in this file. Now, where's the key? Well, the key is present in a different location, of course, inside the same server. The key is present inside of the C drive, Windows folder, System32, config, and you go to the system file. This is the key that I'm talking about. Technically speaking, these are key hives, which you can use to unlock whatever is there in the Active Directory database. But you cannot just copy paste the Active Directory database and then attach them, send them as an attachment to your email and all that. No, that's not going to work. Okay, let's give it a try. So I'm going to do a right click, copy the database, right? And I just try to paste it. I get a file in use error message. Why? Because this is an active database and there are write operations and read operations being performed on in the database. So I'll not be able to copy no matter how many times I try. Okay, so I cannot install a third-party software on my server because when I install a third-party tool, the alarm goes off and the administrator catches me, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm trying to leave minimal digital footprints as possible. Okay, so what I do is I use command prompt, and command prompt is one utility that most of the people who log into server get access to. Okay, it's not a fancy tool anymore. So what can I do as an insider, having, let's say, intermediate access and having access to tools like command prompt? Well, let's use a utility here, a command line utility, which is VSS admin. Now, VSS admin is a command line tool that's going to help you do a lot of things. And one specific action that we are interested in is the create shadow copy action of VSS admin. Okay, now what does this do? Well, this helps you create a new volume shadow copy. Okay, now let's try and create a copy of the Active Directory database and the system file, which is the key. Okay, so VSS admin create shadow. I'm going to create a shadow for the entire C drive here. So for the entire C colon, and I've now successfully created shadow copy for the entire C drive. Now that we are going to be working with the shadow copy, not the actual one, not the actual C drive, we are going to be working with the shadow copy. I need to replace C colon with the shadow copy volume name of C colon moving forward. Okay, so we are now going to copy the Active Directory database and try and paste it somewhere here. So I just want you to pay attention to this area here and see whether the action is a success. Okay, so copy. All right, let's do this. Shadow copy volume name. Okay, paste. So this is how C drive is represented. And inside the C drive, I need to go to the Windows folder. And inside the Windows folder, it's the NTDS folder, and it's the ntds.dit file. Okay, so this is the location of a target file. Now, where do you want this file to be pasted? Well, let's try and paste this on the desktop. Okay, so C users Vivin-1438, that's my username, and I want the file on my desktop. Okay, now when I hit enter, you'll see the Active Directory database getting pasted here. Okay, it says one file copied, and now you have the Active Directory database. So the server is still on, and you have the copy of the database. And what does this file have? Well, this file has your usernames, and it also has password hashes. Now, all you need to do is just repeat the same experiment for this file, the system file, okay? And then have it pasted on your desktop. And then probably send these two files as an attachment to your Gmail or Zoho Mail or whatever it is, okay? And then you can move the attack surface from online attack to an offline attack, okay? So you're outside the network. So all you need to do is just copy these two files and then move your attack surface offline. This is actually a three-step process. Step one being copying these two files, the entities.dit file and the system file. Step two is when you get back home, you use the system file to extract whatever is there in the entities.dit file that includes password hashes. So I'm going to skip step number 2 here because that's not the whole idea. Of course, you have tons of resources available online on how to do it, but I'm going to skip step number 2. Step number 3 is after you get hold of the password hashes that are present in the ntds.dit file, you need to crack the hashes. Only then you'll know what the passwords are, right? So what I'm going to do now is I've already done step number 2 to save time. So if you are wondering how the password hashes look like that are there inside of this file, I have a notepad open for you. Okay. Now, what you're seeing on the screen are not passwords, but password hashes. Okay. Now, how do you crack these hashes? How do you know what the passwords are? Well, there are tons of free password hash crackers available online. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all, copy the hashes, and I'm going to use a free password hash cracker that I'm familiar with or that I like. So I'm using crackstation.net. So if you want to give it a try, you can give it a try because this site gives you information about hashing algorithms, how do they work and all that. So if you're interested, please go ahead. Okay. So I paste the hashes. I confirm that I'm not a robot and I hit crack hashes. Well, I have the passwords. So you see that I have the hash. The algorithm that was used for hashing the password was SHA1. You also see that I have MD5 listed here as the hashing algorithm, and I have the password. Okay, so this is my demo setup. So please excuse my password security. Okay, this is lame. Okay, but you get the point, right? So the idea here is, yes, we need to talk about the concept here is we need to focus on Active Directory security, even when we're talking about it in the year 2021. And we also need to revisit our identity and access management process, keeping Active Directory identity repository in mind. So that's the whole idea of this session. Okay, we will be talking about IAM, but we'll be talking about IAM from a security standpoint. Okay, not just from a process standpoint, but also from a security standpoint. That's the whole idea. All right, let's get started with the actual session here. Now, initially, when the concept of IAM was introduced, the whole idea was just two things: authentication and authorization. Okay, authentication is finding out who's who. Authorization is knowing whether you are allowed access to a certain resource or whether you are restricted access to that resource. Okay, but over the years, over the last few years, we have seen that the umbrella of identity and access management has evolved. The boundary has expanded. So it's no longer just about authentication and authorization. We have a lot more that we need to include when we talk about a complete IAM process. Okay, I'm just going to start with a sequence here. So the first sequence or the first point in the chain is onboarding. Okay, we need to pay attention to identity and access management right from the onboarding stage. And when you already have an IAM tool in place, or you are looking to get one for your organization, or you're trying to replace an existing one, the second important factor that you'll have in mind is API integration. How well does your IAM tool talk to other business applications in your infrastructure? Okay, and then we need to talk about authentication. What are the authentication techniques that my IAM tool supports? Okay, is it just basic authentication, or am I talking about adaptive authentication here, or smart authentication? Okay, then now that we're talking about identities, you need to empower identities by giving them some sort of controlled self-service capabilities. Okay, we also need to think about that when we talk about IAM. And how are we going to offboard users? So when an employee leaves the organization, the employee leaves with some key information, but how are you going to secure the digital print or the digital identity of the user? Okay, how do you offboard them from multiple technology platforms that you use? It can be Active Directory, it can be Microsoft 365, Exchange, Skype for Business, Teams. How do you offboard them across technology platforms? Okay. And since identity management is no longer an administrator's role, you need to think about a non-intrusive delegation model. You need to bring other people or invite other people to the party. So let's say you have your HR initiating the user onboarding process. You have your line managers, changing designations and all that. So you have your helpless technician resetting passwords, unlocking accounts, changing licenses and all that. So we need to think about a delegation strategy that is less intrusive. And the last, statistics or analytics. Okay, analytics is all about gaining insights. Okay, there are two types of analytics that we will be discussing. So we will be discussing about general analytics related to IAM. We'll also be discussing about risk-based analytics. Okay, so something like who deleted the user, who changed the group policy, or who modified an enterprise permission and all that. So these are the 7 functions that we will be discussing from an identity and access management standpoint. Okay, I see that I have, lots of questions coming in. So, all right. So I'll make sure to answer you. I'll get back to you with an answer for all your questions. So please keep them coming. Happy to see the questions here. Okay. All right. Now, the tool that we are going to be using for today's session, or for the offering from Manage Engine, is going to be AD360. Okay. Now, we're going to be taking a look at these functions one by one, but from AD360's standpoint. That's the whole idea here. Okay. So for those of you who are new to AD360, I think it's fair to give you a quick introduction. Right, AD360, some of you might be having modules of AD360, some of you might be already having licenses of AD Audit or AD Self-Service, but AD360 is the largest suite that gives you access to all these modules in one EXE. That's the whole idea here, okay? So do not worry, I will be talking about AD Manager, AD Audit, AD Self-Service, but ultimately everything boils down to AD360, okay? So do not get confused with different products. It's just different modules operating under one umbrella, right? The first function is going to be onboarding, okay? Now, when you talk about onboarding, one thing that I will have to say here is you administrators like to onboard users not just to one technology platform, but multiple technology platforms. Yes. So which means the IAM solution that you have in your organization should have the capability to onboard users across multiple technology platforms, okay? Not just your on-prem, but even to cloud platforms as well, okay? And AD360 or AD Manager Plus, to be more specific, has this layout called the user management layout, right, for the creation process, for the modification process, and even for the deletion process. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, since we are talking about onboarding, I am now going to be explaining AD Manager Plus's onboarding capabilities and 3 core features that I think would really help you implement a strong and at the same time effective onboarding process. Okay, so you use 1 template or you use 2 templates and onboard users across multiple departments and job roles. And I'm going to be talking about 3 core features. So please stay with me. Okay, I'm going to quickly jump to my lab. So I already have AD Manager Plus fired up here. So I'm going to be talking about templates. Okay, when you talk about onboarding, especially onboarding users, I'm going to be talking about templates and how templates can be used for onboarding users across technology platforms. Don't get me wrong, we have templates not just for users, but for every category that you see here. Okay, so when it comes to users, you all have creation templates, you also have modification templates. So let's say you have already onboarded 5,000 employees, and now you need to change a few attributes related to Office 365 or Active Directory for 1,000 employees belonging to a specific geographical location. Okay, you can use a user modification template to change the property. Okay, or you're going to onboard users, let's say across multiple departments, you can use the user creation templates. Similarly, for every object category, we have creation templates and modification templates. Okay, for groups, for contacts, for mailboxes, all kinds of mailboxes here, shared. Oh, by the way, how many of you listening to this session still have a Microsoft Exchange servers in your organization? I would love to see a couple of yeses, okay, if it's not too much to ask. Okay, all right. Yes, yes, yes. Christopher says no. Paul, Exchange on-prem here. Okay, Nick says amen. So many. All right, fantastic. So, which means we can still talk about Exchange since a lot of people are using it, right? So when you onboard a user, it's not just about one technology platform. It's about, onboarding users across technology platforms. Now, a template. So if you quickly open up a template here, the user creation templates. A template has 3 features. Okay, let me quickly explain those 3 features to you. When you open up a template, I've already created a template for the sake of this session, and I've named it user creation-HR. So when you open up a template here, there are 3 features. Of course, you know what copy user attributes are. Let's say you're trying to build a template for the IT department, and you already have an IT user with the exact properties that you want. You can use the copy user attributes functionality to select the target IT user, and then maybe copy properties from that account and paste it on the template. Okay. All right, that's a generic feature. But you might have noticed something in the interface, right? If you take a closer look at the interface, you might have noticed that the general tab is highlighted. The rest of the tabs are grayed out, okay? And within the general tab, you see that the first name and the last name field is highlighted, whereas the logon name is grayed out, okay? Now, why is that? The reason is this template is going to be used by my HR for onboarding users. And when you are handing out a layout to your HR or a form to your HR, it better be simple, right? You don't want your HR to know what the password for the newly recruited user is going to be, right? So if you go to the account tab, you could see that I've already keyed in the password here, okay? So I don't want the HR to be able to see all this. I don't want to know what Office 365 license am I going to map to the user, or I don't want my HR to know what Exchange server is going to be pointed for the user creation and all that. I simply want the HR to be able to fill the first name, the last name, and the title and hit create. And I want the user to be onboarded to all, across technology platforms. I want an Exchange mailbox to be created. I want a remote mailbox to be created for the user and all that, okay? So how do you do that? How do you tailor make this, template to suit your HR, to suit your help desk technician? Well, that's when enable drag and drop comes into picture. When you hit enable drag and drop, the whole layout becomes customizable, okay? Now, let's say you feel, okay, you don't want the, let's say the office or the telephone number or any field for that matter, you don't want this field, you want to delete it. Well, you can just go ahead and delete a field, edit the field, make certain fields hidden from a user's view, or make it completely mandatory and all that, okay? Now, when creating accounts across multiple departments, handling duplicates is one thing, okay? Now, how do you handle duplicates? How do you handle duplicates in Active Directory, in Office 365, in Azure or Exchange, whatever, right? This template gives you an answer for that too, okay? So when you actually, let's say you want to check for duplicates, okay? You can very well check for duplicates across a domain or even across the forest, okay? And whenever there is a duplicate, you can select a different naming format for the duplicate account, or you can create your own format or automatically append numbers and do all kinds of other configurations and healthily onboard users with knowing the logic or by knowing the logic, okay? So that's enable drag and drop. Enable drag and drop is basically for, customizing the layout so that you can hand it over to any user in your organization who onboards users. It can be the HR, line manager, or even the help desk technician, okay? Now, if you're wondering, how can one template be used, okay? Now, I told you that the HR is going to be typing in just the first name, last name, and title of the user, right? Now, how can a user be created just by typing these 3 attributes, okay? Now, I might have 10 different titles here. I might have an architect, engineer, help desk technician, HR manager, IT admin. It can be, let's say, a server admin or whatever. But if you just scroll down, there are a variety of job roles inside one single department. Now, how does this work? Well, that's when the creation rules come into picture. So the creation rules is something that I really like, and this is really beneficial, and this is kind of smart, okay? Let me tell you why. Now, creation rules are basically rules that you can add to a template. You can add any number of rules, okay? Now, what I've done here in this template is I have created 3 rules. A rule for IT admin, another one for a technician, and another one for the server administrator. Now, every rule works based on a condition. And the condition is, for this template, rule number 1, IT admin. If the title of the user is IT admin, then I want certain values to be auto-assigned to the user account. This includes my Office 365, Office 365 licenses as well. So let's say the title is going to be IT admin. I want an E5 license to be mapped to the user, okay? And I want the account to be created in the New Zealand OU, and I want the manager attribute to be set. I want the Office 365 license to be assigned. Yes, I can decide the values based on the parameter, which is the title, okay? Now, if you want a different trigger attribute, yes, you can select a different trigger attribute as well, okay? This is the benefit of using the creation roles inside of the template, okay? Now, this is for onboarding users. Now, let's say you've already onboarded users, okay? And you want to modify them. How do you modify users here? Well, you have the user modification templates. And when you actually open up a user modification template here, let's say I'm going to create a new user modification template because I have 2 attributes for 1,000 users to modify. I'm trying to modify something in bulk. So you have modification rules, something similar to creation rules. You have modification rules. So you will be able to bring in standardization at the time of onboarding. And also after onboarding users, you'll be able to modify them as well at a later point in time. So this is one framework that I would highly recommend when you are trying to onboard users across multiple technology platforms, okay? Not just AD, but various technology platforms or common technology platforms, okay? All right. Now, there are 2 ways of onboarding users. One is you can delegate a template to your HR or your helpdesk technician, or even the domain admins or admins can onboard users. The second way of onboarding users is now that you've created a template, let's say you've created a template built with all the rules in place and all that, you can very well, schedule an automation, and the automation can onboard users for you. That's the whole idea here, okay? Automation and manual tasks can be performed. Let me quickly show this to you. So you go to the automation tab and you create a new automation, okay? And let's say you want to create 5 users, and they are 5 users belonging to 5 different departments, and they are joining your company Monday next week, okay? So how do you onboard users using the automation feature? Well, you select the tasks to be automated, and you select the template that you have already created. And this can be any template with any rule in mind. I've just selected the IT department here. And the source can be a CSV file. It can be a SQL server already having your user, the new hire information. It can be an Oracle database or any common HRMS tool or IT service management tools you have out there in the market, okay? Select the source and then schedule a time for this automation to run. It can be hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. So since this is going to be an onboarding exercise, I would like to schedule this on a daily basis, okay? Daily at let's say 9 o'clock in the morning, okay? So I want the automation to look for new users, and I will specify the location here, and the automation goes to this location and then sees whether there are any new users ready to be onboarded, and it uses the template and the logics, and the users are onboarded. And you want to get notified via text messages and emails, you can simply enable notification, okay? Now, this is onboarding done in an automated manner. Of course, you can do a lot of other things as well when it comes to automation, but this is for onboarding, okay? We'll talk about the other stuff in the upcoming slides. So the users are now readily onboarded using the template. So you get the point, right? So you have a manual way of doing things using the template. You can also automate a user onboarding process. Thereby, you have users onboarded in a quicker and at the same time in a much more error-free manner. The second function that I think that an IAM solution should have is the ability to talk to other business applications. Okay. Now, talking about AD Manager Plus as an Active Directory and Office 365 management tool, now that most of you said that you're operating in a hybrid setup, this tool can talk to a variety of business applications, okay, belonging to various verticals. Okay, you have Altipro, Service Desk Plus, ServiceNow, Zendesk, Zoho People, Workday, and it can also talk to databases and other HR applications. Now, the best thing about the application is it can also talk to your SIEM tool. Okay, for instance, if Vivin logs into AD Manager Plus and then Vivin modifies the Office 365 licenses or permission of a user using the tool, you want that audit log to be forwarded as a syslog to your central log repository. Yes, we will be able to do that as well, so that you get to know the actions performed by your technicians or admins using the tool by looking at your SIEM solution, and you'll be able to catch any anomalies or any deviations. Okay. All right. This is how the screen would look like. I told you that AD Manager Plus could handshake with common business applications out there. After the integration of AD Manager Plus with Service Desk, your Service Desk technicians, when they log into Service Desk for raising a ticket, let's say for user onboarding, they get additional options, okay, so that they need not raise a request, they can perform the action directly, okay? And if you're wondering, can this action be controlled and then executed? Yes, we'll be able to do that as well, okay? So I just wanted to show you, or I just wanted to give you a feel of how the user interface looks like after the integration is done. That's the whole point of this screenshot here. Now, if you're using ServiceNow, which is another IT service management tool, the ServiceNow console gets additional Active Directory operations, okay, right from the ServiceNow console itself. So the users need not toggle between multiple windows, okay. Function 3 is automation. Now, this is kind of important, and I really believe that this is the need of the hour, because almost at least 60 to 70% of us are still working from our homes. You have lockdowns announced every now and then, so things are a bit on the positive side, but not completely. So now is the time that we'll have to think about remote authentication techniques and how do you secure your remote workforce. Is there going to be a different password protocol or authentication mechanism that I have to think about and all that? Let's keep it really simple. I'm just going to be talking about two things here, two layers of authentication, and then I'm going to show you how AD360 can help you achieve a need-of-the-hour authentication process. I'm not saying that this is state-of-the-art. Okay, I would be lying if I said that, but this tool can help you achieve standard authentication processes in your organization, and you can effectively roll out the authentication process to your remote employees as well. Okay. Now, whenever I talk about authentication, I am often reminded about something here. Old habits seldom die. Okay. No matter how hard the administrators try to secure the credentials of the employees, well, there are certain exceptions. That's all we can say, right? So, and I'm also reminded of the statement when I talk about authentication. I don't know why. So it's something like a chain is as strong as the weakest link. Okay, and if we think about who the weakest link is when it comes to IT security, and we very well know the answer, right? So the weakest link in IT security, even in the year 2021 and moving forward, is still going to be humans, okay? Because you might have state-of-the-art firewalls, you have IPS, you have IDS, you have multi-factor authentication, you have passwordless authentication, you have virus scanners, vulnerability scanners, and all that. Okay, and you're patching your systems, and you have MDMs and all that. But still, the weakest link in IT security are humans. Okay. Now let me keep it really simple here. But before that, I've been asking this question in all my talks, and I'd like to repeat the question even now. Okay. How many of you listening to this session right now are still using passwords for authentication? Okay. Of course, we have passwordless authentication. People are talking about passwordless authentication, but I'd like to know how many of you listening to this session right now are still using passwords for authentication. Can I see a couple of yeses if you're still using passwords, right? I'm not going to read out the names this time, right? Okay. Passwords, passwords, passwords. Okay, someone is using a passphrase, which is really, really good. Okay. Okay, fantastic, fantastic. All right, so you have lots of yeses and few nos, and then you have mixtures. Okay. So what I'm trying to convey is there are majority of, if you're operating a hybrid setup, okay, chances are you are still depending on a password-based mechanism. Okay. So when you are talking about a password-based authentication process, then we'll have to think about the first level of authentication, which is password-based, and the second level of authentication being any MFA technique that you can think of or that you can adopt in your organization, right? So when talking about passwords, of course, you can talk about n number of things, and some of the users, and rightly said that they're using passphrases. They're not using passwords anymore, which is a really good thing. But your passwords just need to follow these two rules. Okay, it should be hard to brute force. It should not fall under common dictionary tag. Okay, easier said than done. Okay, but these two patterns are evolving every month. Okay, you have new brute force techniques, you have new dictionary attacks. So it's really important for us to keep up with these two techniques and ensure that your users are not using, easy breakable passwords. Okay, so that's the whole idea here. Now, before talking about password security, I'd like to just talk about a bit about some things that we already know here. What you're seeing on the screen right now is your Windows password policy. So if you have Active Directory, chances are you already know this. Okay, so your password should be minimum of 5 characters. Minimum 5 or 6 or 7 characters. You should change your password once in every 45 days. A minimum password age is 1. It should have 7 characters. Complexity requirements enabled. Store passwords using reversible encryption and all that. And you have, your password character requirements listed, uppercase, lowercase. We all know this. Okay, we've been used to this for years now. Now this is your on-prem password policy. Now let's take a look at the cloud password policy for Microsoft. I'm talking about Microsoft 365 password policy recommendation from Microsoft. Okay, so the next slide is the password policy recommendation for Microsoft 365. Now just take a look at the difference here. Okay, of course you have some similarities, but you have some contradicting points here. Now in the previous slide, Microsoft said, nothing against Microsoft. I have immense respect for Microsoft as a technology company, but I'm just trying to give some facts here. Okay, I'm not trying to belittle the company or the technology. So the point here is, initially for the on-prem, we had to change our passwords once in every 40 days or 30 days or whatever. Now, when you go to Microsoft 365, don't require mandatory password resets for user accounts. Now, what that means is day one, you set a password and you can have the same password for, let's say, 365 days. You don't change them. Okay. Now, the second contradiction is don't require character composition requirements. Okay. Maintain a 8-character minimum length requirement. Okay. Now, this points 2 and 3 were completely contradictory, okay, to the previous slide. But I did not get the point until I read the 4th point, which is ban common passwords. This is a good thing. I like this in the recommendation. So Microsoft says administrators need to find a way of banning common passwords to keep the most vulnerable passwords out of your system. Okay, this is one good thing. Okay, now how do you do this is a different thing altogether. And the 5th and the 6th point emphasize the process of multi-factor authentication. So what Microsoft suggests is, Microsoft basically says that the first layer of authentication need not be that hard, which is you can still have a simple password without any character composition requirements or mandatory password resets after 30 days. But the second layer of authentication needs to be really secure, which is MFA. Okay, so Microsoft is betting heavy on the MFA part and moving to passwordless authentication. Now, my request to all of you listening to this session is we need to focus on two levels. We need not just focus on the second level alone. We still need to pay attention to level number one. Okay, we need to ensure that there's a right mix of password policies. You might have a password policy for your on-prem, for Azure, and then you have your SaaS applications. It's really important that we have a right balance, okay, of all these password policies and arrive at a password policy that fits in all these platforms. Okay, but please bear in mind, having said that, you need not be too hard on your users when it comes to password requirements. Okay, you have to set a policy in such a way that you strike the right balance between user convenience and security, and at the same time, you are in compliance with all password policy requirements in your organization, be it that of Active Directory, be it that of Azure, be it that of SaaS applications. Okay. The second point is, of course, we need to think about implementing MFA, not just regular MFA, adaptive MFA, and then establishing single sign-on for a variety of SaaS applications in a controlled manner, and then enable password sync whenever or wherever possible. Okay. Now, if I were to give you an authentication checklist for 2021, keeping remote authentication process in mind, well, I just have 3 points for you. One is please think about securing local and remote login attempts. Number two, think about a policy that would help you defend against credential-based attacks. Of course, you know the common attacks, password spray, brute force, dictionary, and all that. Number three, really important, especially now that we are focusing on Europe. So it's really important that we focus on the regulatory compliance. So if your organization falls under that specific vertical, it's really important that we understand the consequence of not following a strict password policy or a strict credential securing policy. Okay, so these are 3 points that we have in mind. And now that we are talking about the Active Directory offering from ManageEngine, I'm going to show you how AD360 is going to help you achieve the first level of security, which is strengthening your passwords. I'm going to show you what are the MFA techniques that we have and how can you secure your remote logins. Number 3, I'm going to be talking about how do you, open up your single sign-on capabilities for your users in a very controlled manner. Okay. Well, the first point that I'd like to discuss when it comes to the first level of security, something related to passwords, is you will have to arrive at a password policy that sits on top of your existing password policies, be it Windows, SaaS, or Azure, or whatever it is. Okay. That's when we have something called as, let me quickly go to this deck, right? We have something called as Password Policy Enforcer inside of a module of AD360, which is AD SelfService. Let me quickly log into the tool. And just to letting you know, I'm working with a demo setup that is available online. So if you have not used AD SelfService before and you'd like to know, oh, well, what are the other features? You can give it a try. Okay, the URL is right there on the screen. So the first level of access, first level of securing your access is through Password Policy Enforcer. Now, this Password Policy Enforcer is going to help you create a password policy that's going to be in compliance with all your technology platforms. And at the same time, it's going to be easy for your users to set a non-compromised password or a password that is not already compromised somewhere in the dark web. Okay. Now, we have 4 types of restrictions here for this password policy. You have restrictions based on characters, the one that you see here. You have restrictions based on repetition. Okay, let's say old passwords or certain patterns or whatever. So you have restrictions based on patterns as well. Remember Microsoft recommendation? Microsoft said that you should, prevent your users from using some compromised passwords. Okay, you can very well use modified patterns or import a dictionary and prevent users from using some common banned passwords. Okay, and we have restrictions based on length. So these are the 4 restrictions that we have, and you can create a password policy and then map it to the users depending on their job role. You can map it to an OU of users, or you can map it to a group of users. So let's say you have a group called IT technicians, and you have another group called IT admins, and you have another group called domain users. Okay, you can have 3 different policies and then have them mapped to the groups, so that when they try to log in to the tool, or when they're trying to change their password or reset their account or whatever, they will have to follow the conditions that you set in the password policy. Okay, for instance, the policy is selfservice.com. So you can create any number of policies and then link it to the domain. Now, you might ask me, now what if an administrator resets the password using ADUC? So let's say I'm not going to use the tool, I'm an administrator, and what I do here is I actually reset the password instead of ADUC. So how will this take effect? So is the password policy still going to be applicable here? The answer is yes. Now what happens here is we will be able to enforce a password sync agent and force the users, whenever they're trying to reset their passwords, or whenever an admin or a technician is trying to reset the password for users, we will apply the policy for that user so that a password is set according to that requirement. Okay, so password resets done through ADUC can still be handled as well. So this is for strengthening your password. Okay, you can create a policy according to your requirement. You can create any number of policies and then link it to a group, link it to OU, and then advanced policy rules allow you to restrict common dictionary words, pattern, passphrases, and more. Okay, you can also display customizable messages in the user interface itself, okay, while password reset or password change operations. Okay, now this is for setting up password policy. Now let's come to self-service. Now let's assume that you've already set a policy in place with all the right configurations. Okay. Now comes the part of self-service. The question is, if your users forget their password, or the password expires, or the account is locked out or whatever, the only screen that they will be seeing is the Control-Alt-Delete screen. So how are you going to give the capability for an end user to access the self-service portal? Okay, thereby they can handle the self-service their own account. Okay, when the computer is locked out, or when the account is locked out, or when the password is expired. Well, the self-service module, which is AD self-service, has this link or extension which can be placed in a variety of interfaces. Okay, so if you're using a Windows laptop, we have a GINA, a Mac extension, a GINA extension placed on the login screen. If you're using Mac, we have a reset password extension on your Macs. If you're using OWA or Citrix or whatever it is, we will, or even SharePoint, we will be able to place the self-service link right in that screen itself. Okay, so that your users, when they forget their password, in order for them to self-service, they just click the link and then they move forward with the self-service operation. Okay, now let me ask you one question here. You have set a policy, and you've also given the users the ability to, enable, or the ability to self-service their credentials whenever they forget their password, or their password is expired, or whatever. Okay, but how are you going to convey your password policy to the user? Okay, because I told you that you can set a password policy, a different password policy depending on the job roles. Okay, now you have 2 users, an IT administrator and a regular user, which is a domain user, and you have set 2 different policies. Okay, now how are you going to give the user the ability to understand what is the exact password policy for their job role? Okay, how are we going to convey that? Well, when the users click the link and they key in their credentials, which is their username, depending on their job role to which their account is mapped, we will be able to display their password policy in the screen itself. Okay, so users will be able to understand their password policy requirements, or we will be able to display their password policy requirements right in the screen itself. Okay, now this is the first level of authentication. I hope I have made myself clear till now. So far, we have discussed about how do you set up a good password policy with striking the right balance, and how do you actually give the users the ability to self-service. And when the users are beginning to self-service their credential, how are you going to convey your password requirements to the end users? Well, I told you that we will be able to display the password policy right in their screen, irrespective of the endpoint that they use. Okay. Now let's talk about the second layer of authentication. The first layer was password. I understand that most of you still use passwords. So we are done with the first layer. Now the second layer is, let's talk about MFA. Okay. Now, when you talk about MFA, I don't want you to just think about MFA as a regular MFA. We'll have to think about adaptive MFA. The difference is adaptive MFA looks at multiple parameters and then allows a user to access the resources in your organization. It can be geographical location, it can be an IP address, it can be a client that is blacklisted or whatever it is. Okay, so we are talking about adaptive MFA. And AD Self-Service Plus, which is a module of AD 360, has 17 different authentication methods that you can pick and choose from. Okay, and it also has integrations with third-party blacklisted passwords, a repository, so that when your users are actually trying to set a password which has been already compromised, we don't allow the users to set such compromised passwords. Okay, and now that most of us are still working from home, I assume that some of you are still depending on VPN to connect to your corporate network from your home. So we'll have to also bring in MFA into consideration for your VPN authentication as well. Okay, now AD Self-Service, again, when you go to the multi-factor authentication section, gives you the ability to pick and choose from 17 different authentication techniques here. Some conventional techniques like security question and answers, email verification, SMS verification, and then you have a lot of other options that you can pick and choose from. Okay, it can be smart card or SAML based authentication, fingerprint, face ID, radius authentication, Google Authenticator, whatever it is. Okay, you can pick and choose the MFA again based on the job role, again based on the department. So if it's an IT administrator, you want 2 levels of authentication, you can go with Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. Or if you feel like you need just 1 level of authentication, well, pick and choose the one that you are comfortable with, right? And then enroll it to your users. Now, multi-factor authentication for reset and unlock operation. Okay. Now, when your users are trying to self-service their credential, if you want to secure the account using an additional layer of authentication, yes, we will be able to do that as well. Okay. Now comes the best part, multi-factor authentication for endpoints. When your users are trying to log into a Windows PC or a Mac or a Linux box, okay, or they're trying to initiate a VPN connection, you want certain type of authentication mechanisms to be triggered, we will be able to accommodate all of your authentication requirements and then enroll a policy that your users can easily abide by. Okay, so added to this, I already told you that we also have tie-ups with third-party, compromised repositories, compromised password repositories, which will prevent your users from setting compromised passwords. Okay. All right. So I think we have discussed about the first level of authentication, which is how do you secure your passwords. And we've also discussed about, how do you secure your second level of access, which is MFA. Okay? And I told you that we have 17 different authentication techniques, which you can pick and choose from. Right now, just to show you a quick sample here, two-factor authentication for Windows logons. Okay, let's say your administrators are trying to RDP to a server. Okay, so this is how the two-factor authentication looks like. So the first level of authentication, enter. Now we have AD self-service. So I select the email. So I open up my Gmail. I have the verification code right here. I key in the code, hit continue. I then get access to my server. Okay, so this is a regular authentication mechanism that you can deploy across endpoints and also across servers as well. Okay, not just Windows, but Mac and Linux boxes as well. So we are now securing both the levels of authentications, password and the second level. The third aspect is, this is something to do with a user convenience, right? So SSO. Now, I understand that organizations nowadays have, variety of SaaS applications deployed. So if you go to the application link here, the application tab, okay, I'm going to show you something real quick. Right now, you have variety of applications, SaaS applications that your users use for their day-to-day work. Okay, so right from productivity applications, your CRM, your analytics tools, customer support applications. So we have all these categories of applications, and users need access to some of these applications. Some of the applications are common, some of them are role specific. Okay, so it's very important for us to think about a self-service portal through which users gain access to the application. And when I say self-service, or a single sign-on portal, I am not referring to an all-in-one access portal. Okay, you will be able to open up single sign-on for cloud applications depending on your job role, and at the same time, if you want that to be accompanied by two-factor authentication, okay, you can still deploy two-factor authentication even via during single sign-on. Okay, I know that it's a bit contradictory, but organizations nowadays want single sign-on to be opened up for certain applications, but for certain other SaaS applications, they want an additional layer of security to be in place. That's why we have given the administrators the ability to pick and choose the applications for which they think they might need another level of authentication, okay, even with single sign-on. So multi-factor authentication, even for cloud applications. And password support for remote employees. Okay, this is kind of interesting, and this is very useful, I would say. Now, what happens is, let's say I'm working from home, and I actually change my password, my Windows password. Okay. Now, when I actually change the Windows password, it does not really impact the domain configuration, because my laptop still has the previous hash, okay, or the cached credential is still there in my laptop. So whenever I try to log in, to the network, I will still be using the cached credential. So when you try to reset your password, it's very important that you update your cached credentials too. And you will not be able to update your cached credentials if you're not connected to your domain. Okay. Now, AD self-service will help you update your endpoint's cached credentials when deployed. Okay. So let's say the user is trying to reset the password via AD self-service, and the request goes to your domain, and the operation is a success. The cached password is then verified. Okay, this is the third step of verification. The cached password is then verified. After the cached password is verified, the machine confirms that the cached password can now be updated, which is the fourth step. And in your client, the cached password gets updated with a new password. Okay. So this is a 4-step process. So the user resets the password via AD self-service, the operation reaches the domain, and there's a new password. And now verification of cached credentials takes place over a VPN connection. And the response is updating your existing cache credential. Thereby, users can very well move forward with their new password. And also their cache is now reset. All right. Now we've talked about authentication, self-service, and all that, but the most important question that we need to answer is how secure is this? Okay. Is this going to be like easy to get in? Well, no application is 100% attack proof or foolproof. Well, the only thing that we can do is we can try and improve the process every time, be it the login process or the self-service process. Now, AD self-service has this CAP. What I call as CAP is conditional access policy that will allow the end users to perform certain functions or restrict certain functions depending on various conditions. Okay. For example, it looks at 4 different parameters when a user is trying to perform or access the portal. It looks at the network, device, geolocation, and working hours. Only when these 4 parameters are in the permissible limit, the user will be allowed to use the features such as password self-service or endpoint multi-factor authentication or cloud or on-prem apps SSO. If any one of these factors are not satisfactory, if the machine finds it not satisfactory or a bit unsafe, then you have a challenge mechanism. Okay, you have block access, allow limited access, increase assurance by more multi-factor authentication techniques, or if it's safe, allow full access. Okay? So it's not just about securing your credentials, it is all about securing access. That's the whole idea of the AD self-service module of AD 360. Okay. Now, for all this to take place, your users need to enroll, right? But when you actually send a mail tomorrow to your users asking them to enroll, your users are not going to enroll because force of habit. Okay. Now, just because you send an email asking them to enroll into something, your users are not going to enroll into a tool. Okay. So what we have inside of AD Self-Service Plus is we have multiple ways by which you can onboard your users to a secure self-service portal. Okay. You have forced enrollment, automatic enrollment, or you can just be gentle and then keep sending them enrollment notification. Okay, and hope that they enroll sometime. All right, so we have various techniques to onboard users as well. Now, another 10-15 minutes, then we wrap it up. Similar to onboarding, you remember that we talked about onboarding users, right? So I told you that you will be able to onboard users automatically. Now, similar to user onboarding, you can also create an automation for offboarding users as well. Or if you want to clean up your Office 365 or clean up your AD, you can even think about doing it in an automated manner. Okay, I'm just going to give you an example here. And the example in the picture, okay, let me actually give you a better image, right? All right. So let's say you're scanning your AD and Office 365, or for that matter, Exchange. Okay, you're looking for inactive objects. Inactive in the sense the user has not logged in for the last 365 days. Okay, but the account is still enabled. You can write your own logic and handle the account accordingly. Okay, not just in AD, but also across multiple technology platforms, and have a clean and tidy Microsoft 365 and Active Directory infrastructure. Okay, now for example, if I go to AD Manager Plus, I want to write my own logic for purging users. Okay? In the sense, I want the accounts to be purged. So what I do here is I create a new policy. A policy is what you do in a custom manner. Okay. Now you can pick and choose an action that you want from the script. That can even be a custom script. Okay. Now, one of the users right in this webinar has asked me a question. Can I have a custom script? Okay. executed soon after the accounts are disabled? The answer is yes. Okay, you can just have the custom script invoked whenever a user account is disabled or deleted or created or whatever it is. Okay, so you can automate this process in the sense you can write your own logic. You can just keep adding actions here. So all these actions under this, this column or this box is the instant tasks. Now, if you want an action to take place after n number of days, let's say after 1 day or 30 days, you then add a successive task. Okay, so this is how you create your own policy for creating users, for modifying users, even for offboarding users across technology platforms using automation. Now, a word of caution. I've been talking about automation for quite some time now. Okay, now what you're seeing on the screen is automation in theory. Now, automation in theory is flawless. All of us know that automation is flawless in theory. So you want the automation to do something, it does exactly that for you. But administrators have experienced automation in reality, and they know that there are chances for errors. Okay. Now, all I'm saying is when you try to automate a process for, let's say, disabling accounts, or let's say for removing an account, I want you to control an automation. In the sense, I want you to implement a workflow, and I want you to be able to say yes or no to an automation. Okay, so how do you do that? Really simple. So when you go to the automation tab, let's say you're trying to delete accounts. Okay, so you're going to, let's say, delete accounts. Now, delete is a very crucial operation, so you might want some supervision over that action, right? So you select the checkbox which says implement business workflow. Now, what happens here is whenever the automation is going to delete X number of users, the workflow gets triggered, which means the list of users will be sent as a request to you, which is the admin, and the admin or the line manager or the technician can decide whether the automation should move forward or to modify the automation, right? Now, the workflow link right here goes directly to the workflow tab. So you have a multi-stage approval. Only when all three levels are cleared, the action takes place in Office 365 or AD or Exchange. If you think that there are too many levels of approval, you don't want that, well, you can keep it simple. You just can have a requester and an executor. Okay, so only when the executor says yes, the action takes place in the technology platform. Right? So automation is a good thing, but think about implementing controlled automation. That's the whole idea here. All right, so now I'm just going to quickly jump to the analytics part, spend, let's say, another 5-10 minutes and then wrap up the session. Okay. Now, first of all, thank you very much for for staying back. So I see that we have close to 90% attendance still at the end of 1 hour and 20 minutes. So thank you very much for that. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to be talking about the risk aspects of the risk aspects of identity and access management that we need to track. I'm going to be focusing on Windows, but I'll touch upon the Azure auditing aspect as well. Okay. Now, for analytics pertaining to risk, focusing on the Windows and your Azure portal, we have a dedicated module called AD Audit Plus. Okay, this is the module. So AD Audit Plus, let me quickly open up the module for you. Right, let me close this. Right, close. All right, this is AD Audit Plus. Let me actually tell you why did we even introduce AD Audit Plus in the market. Okay, I understand that some of you are already using AD Audit Plus, but for those of you who do not know what AD Audit Plus is, let me tell you a small, a small story. Okay, the reason why we wanted to introduce AD Audit Plus in the market is most of you know Windows auditing, or all of you know Windows auditing, right? So if you go to Active Directory, okay, let's say you delete, I shouldn't be deleting an admin account, but I did, I'm sorry. So let's say I delete a user, delete a couple of users. The action that you perform in your Active Directory is recorded inside the event viewer, and the event viewer has the security log, which takes place. I mean, which records every action that you perform in AD. So let's say you delete a user, reset password, whatever it is. Everything gets recorded here. Okay, but there are two limitations to this security log that made us to develop a tool for auditing Active Directory. Challenge number one is the security log that you see on the screen does not replicate. In a sense, if you have two servers, okay, and you log into server number one, and you open up, let's say, Active Directory, and you delete an account. Who do I delete? So I don't like the line manager, so let's delete Aaron Smith. Okay, so I've deleted Aaron Smith's account. Now, the deletion of that account will only be recorded in this security log that you see on the server. So if I log into another server, let's say server B, and I open up the security log and I try to view the event there, the event will not be present. Okay, so you get the point. The events do not get replicated to another server. The objects get replicated. So if I create a user tomorrow morning, the user will be seen in all my 5 servers if I open up ADUC. But the event does not get replicated. Of course, Microsoft has very well addressed the problem. It has even subscriptions, it has forwarded events and all that, but still that's a bit of a trick. Okay. Now the second problem that we see with the event with the security log is the size of the security log. Okay. You want to know how big the security log can get? Well, the security log that you're seeing on the screen, let me quickly open up something here. All right, let's try and open up GPMC. Please bear with me for a quick second. All right, I'm just trying to show you the settings so that you see it for yourself. Okay. Now, if you open up security settings, right, we are right here in the event log. So maximum security log size. So we are talking about the security log here, and there is a setting that defines the maximum security log size. When you actually open up the setting and you go to the explain tab here, okay, and when you read these 3 lines, you get to know that the actual size of the security log cannot get any bigger than 300 megabytes. Okay. The theoretical maximum is 4 gigabytes. You can set it up to 4 gigs, but the practical limitation is 300 megabytes. So what that means is whenever 300 megabytes gets filled, there's a new log, okay? Which means you have a new entry. So you are talking about hundreds and thousands of events per log into number of logs into number of servers, okay? So that's really hard. So we wanted to address the problem. Okay, Microsoft gave us an amazing tool like Event Viewer, which captures all the things that you want. But what Microsoft did not address, at least for the on-prem part, is the size limitation of the security log and the replication limitation, which is still true till date. Okay, of course you have forwarded events and event subscriptions, but that's a different story altogether. Now that's when we thought we will introduce AD Audit Plus out there on the market that will help you audit Active Directory. Azure Active Directory, okay, let me repeat, it audits your Active Directory and at the same time Azure Active Directory. So administrators using hybrid setup, hello, this is for you, okay? And we audit member servers, workstations, file servers, NetApp, and EMC, okay? And then we do the regular things like we have our own rules for parsing. They give you, information in the form of reports. We also give you real-time SMS and text notifications. But let's jump right into the events. That's really important, right? So I have just five or six events, but I'm not going to be diving into everything here because I'll just focus on, let's say, events 3, 4, and 5, because I think that's relatively new and that's really important, okay? The first event that I would like to share with you, okay, is something related to groups, because I see that most of the administrators have actually benefited more from group auditing, from the group auditing feature of AD Audit Plus. So I just wanted to give this away to you. Okay, if you are using ADR Plus today, or even if you're not using ADR Plus today, I just want you to secure your groups, because adding a user to the to the wrong group, or adding a wrong user to the to a high privilege group could be catastrophic. Okay, so I want you to watch out for these events in the security log, and then track these events. Okay, I'm not I've mentioned these event IDs not to scare you. I understand that some of you are not using ADR Plus, are already using a different solution. I just want you to check whether your application captures all these events that you see on the screen, because these are really important in order to capture changes made to security groups. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to do something live. ADR Plus, okay, has, if you go to the configuration tab of ADR Plus, has something called as report profiles and alert profiles. Now, if you go to the report profile section, for every category, for Azure AD password protection or account log on, log off, for PowerShell auditing PowerShell, GPO management, everything, you have built-in alarms or built-in event IDs, okay, built-in rules. So when you go to the group modification section, you have rules. Now, these rules are nothing but every rule actually looks for a specific action. And if that action happens in your infrastructure, ADR Plus captures the action, stores it in its own database. And if you want an alert to be sent to your phone or email, yes, we'll be able to do that. Okay, that's the whole idea. That's why you have report profiles for reporting or capturing, alert profiles to alert you. Okay, of course, there are various advanced features in this, but I'm not diving into the details here. But one feature that I'd like to show or demo now is the group reports, or the group modification feature, which focuses on all these event IDs. Now, every event ID represents an action. Okay, 4728 means an action, 29 means a different action. Now, almost every action related to groups is captured by ADR Plus. So users added or removed from admin groups. So if I actually quickly open up the rule here, and if I go to the actions pertaining to group modification, I see that ADR Plus is capable of auditing almost all actions related to groups. Okay, but the two actions that I'm really interested in is I need to know whenever a member is added to a group. I also need to know whenever a member is removed from a security group. Okay, I have 1,000 security groups. Are you actually saying that I receive an email notification every time when a user is added or removed from all those groups? No, the point is not that. Okay, we are just trying to track the admin groups. So whenever someone is added or removed from the high privilege groups, I need to know. And what are those high privilege groups? Well, administrators, DHCP operators. You can add any high privilege group in your setup to the list, and then tell ADR Plus to capture members being added to the group or removed from the group. Okay, let's do this real time now. I just want you to watch this recent alert space right here. Okay, recent alert space. What I'm going to do now is I am going to open up my domain users, domain admins. Okay, domain admins is right here. I go to members. Let's add a user. Okay, let's add Brandon. Okay, check names, Brandon Curry. Brandon is now added to the domain admins group. I hit apply and okay. Okay, now that I have a rule in place, if you go to the recent alert section here, okay, the recent alert section tells you user Brandon Curry was added to the domain admins by Vivin-1438, and you have the timestamp right here. Okay, now similarly, ADR Plus is capable of auditing in real time almost all the categories that you see here on the left. Okay, and also audit your Azure infrastructure as well. So we audit the on-prem and also the Azure part. Okay, I'm just going to be talking about one important feature here, another important feature. Okay, one last question to all of you. How many of you are still using PowerShell? I know this is a dumb question, but I would like to see a couple of yeses if you're still using PowerShell for your regular operations. Okay. Can I see a couple of yeses if you're still using PowerShell? Okay. 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 Someone says, I hate PowerShell. Okay. Only rarely. What do you mean still? Yes, of course. Okay. So I clearly see that there are fans of PowerShell here listening to this session. I understand that, you know, Christopher says, okay, because I hate it. Okay. He has to learn PowerShell because his job demands, but he hates PowerShell. Okay. I'm with you, Christopher. So the point that I'm trying to drive here is all of this is PowerShell, and PowerShell is a really powerful tool. It can do anything that you want if you really know how to play with it, okay? But the point that I'm trying to drive is you really need to audit PowerShell as well. You know why? For obvious reason, that PowerShell can be weaponized. Now, what AD Audit Plus does is, AD Audit Plus, if you go to the server audit section, okay, AD Audit Plus can help you audit PowerShell. We have a dedicated PowerShell auditing module right here, and you can audit a process, script block, or module. So when you go to the module part, if you want to know who executed the script and what was in the script and all that, well, we give you answers. So we give you who executed the script, the time, the command name and type, the source. We also tell you the name of the script. Okay. So I see that a user named AD Manager, okay, has run a script, okay, and I see that it's an import CSV operation, okay, and now I'm facing some issues in my infrastructure, okay, and I know the timestamp right here, okay, the timestamp is mentioned right here, so I clearly know that the problem was after this time, okay. Now, how do I know what was in the script? I know who executed the script, when was the script executed, and I see a CSV import operation. The event number confirms it, but what was in the script? Well, if you hit the details, this is where you get the metadata of the script. Okay, just watch the screen for a quick second. When you hit details, you get script data right here. Okay, so the application is capable of capturing the metadata of the script and thereby telling you what was the whole idea behind the script. Okay, and the last point that I would like to, stress is AD Audit Plus does all kinds of manual auditing activities. Okay, it even tells you whether there are any unsecure clients allowing connections or unsecure servers, or I'm sorry, whether your servers are allowing any unsecure clients. All of you know what an LDAP bind is, right? But how do you know whether your servers are allowing only secure binds and not unsecure binds? Well, use AD Audit, okay, or any other tool that gives you such information. Because let me tell you something, okay, and then quickly move on to the other topic. I really want you to get this point here, okay? Okay. Now, this is something new that event IDs 2887 and 2889, and Microsoft has actually released a patch for unsecure LDAP bindings, and Microsoft also tells you how to find out whether your servers are allowing unsecure client communications, because I need you to watch out for event IDs 2887 and 2889. This is not a regular auditing process. You'll have to do something a bit different. You'll have to configure something in order to capture these two events. If you do not know how to look out for event IDs 2887 and 2889, please Google it up right now, or you can very well send me a message right now so that I'll be able to share the document, okay? So these two events will be logged in your logs if your servers are allowing unsecure client communications. In a sense, the first two types. Simple LDAP bind, which means your credentials are transferred over the network in clear text. And then unsigned simple or SASL LDAP bind, which means it does not require signing. If your clients are, if your servers are allowing secure LDAP connections, that's perfectly fine. That's what we need. But how do you know whether your servers are allowing unsecure communications? Well, your logs will be logging 2887 and 2889. It's high time that we configure and capture this. Okay. If you do not know how to configure and how to capture, just drop me a message. I'll send the doc to you. Okay. Right now. Now, AD Audit Plus also helps you understand if there are any unsecure LDAP connections in your organization. Okay. You see that event ID 2887 is logged, which means there is an unsecure LDAP bind. And in fact, there are 4 unsecure LDAP binds. Okay. And you can also watch out for 2889 if that's your requirement. Okay. So AD Audit captures information manually, and at the same time, you can use machine learning. You can also get the help of machine learning. You can leverage machine learning to detect anomalies. So now that we gather information from a variety of platforms, we can leverage machine learning to detect and let you know whenever there is an anomaly based on time, anomaly based on, let's say, count, even anomaly based on pattern. Let's say first time remote access on a host. So let's say Vivin is a user in your company and he has been in the IT department for more than, let's say he has been in the marketing department for more than 5 years and he has not accessed a server in the last 5 years. So whenever I attempt or my account attempts remote access to a host, your machine learning algorithm detects that and flags it. Okay. And since the algorithm is dynamic, if the operation is okay, the deviation will not be flagged moving forward. So the application can capture events based on your rules, which you have in the configuration tab. You can create your own rules. Of course, we do have custom rules as well. And at the same time, and at the same time, you can also leverage machine learning to detect anomalies in your network based on time, count, and pattern. Okay. With that said, I'm going to quickly wrap up the session.